New England Football Show presented by Mortgage Right. I'm your host, John Sarianides, and as always, I'm joined by my partner, Kevin Stone. Kevin, how are you this evening?
Doing good, man. Busy day, but doing well. How are you?
Doing all right. You know, I've got one eye on football and one eye on my beloved Montreal Canadiens, who need a win tonight to qualify for the NHL playoffs. It's
Is
been
that
4 years, so
is that true?
yeah, if they win tonight, they're in. They're going to play the Washington Capitals, who I think are ripe for an upset. So,
100%.
um, but the big news with the Canadians tonight is Ivan Demidov, who was the fifth overall pick in last year's draft, has come over from the KHL. He already scored tonight. He's a stud, as you can tell by my stupid grin. I'm pretty excited about that. But yeah, thank goodness he was in last year's draft, not this year's draft, because in this year's draft, the Bruins are probably going to end up with a top 5 pick, and I wouldn't want to see anybody good on the Bruins,
They'll,
let alone him.
they'll screw it
So
up.
I hope they do. I hope
They
they
will.
do. It'd be nice. I love that they're keeping Don Sweeney. That's great news.
No comment. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's awesome. Keep him and Neely forever, as far as I'm concerned. Before we do get started here, I do want to remind you that we are brought to you by Mortgage Right. If you're in the market to sell your current home, purchase your first home, or refinance, give Herb Devine a call at 781-254-2846. You can also shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. With over 27 years of experience, Herb is the guy you need in your corner when you're looking to go through the lending process. Herb can help you in many of the different aspects of purchasing a property. So his experience is valuable. Give him a call again at 781-254-2846, or you could shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. He and his team are available anytime, including nights and weekends. All right, Kevin, of course, the NFL draft is around the corner. We're about 10 days away. It's a week from Thursday. Round one is a week from Thursday. The Patriots are going to be hosting the media tomorrow for their annual pre-draft presser. Mike Vrabel is scheduled to meet with the media at 1 p.m. Should be interesting. I'm sure he's going to get a lot of questions in regards to what the Patriots may or may not do with the fourth overall pick. We did get a report tonight from NFL Network's Tom Pelissero that the New York Giants are going to work out Shedeur Sanders on Thursday. So they're going to take one more look at him. Now, the way I see that there's two ways to look at that. One, you don't want to hear that because you hope Sanders is on the board when the Patriots are picking at fourth, because the phone might ring and somebody might be willing to overpay to trade up. But on the other hand, if you want to look at the silver lining, on the other hand, if they take Sanders, let's say at 3, now somebody like a Travis Hunter or an Abdul Carter could be available to the Patriots at 4. Nonetheless, I don't think that Mike Vrabel is going to get into the weeds tomorrow in regards to what the Patriots are going to be doing starting next Thursday. But it would be nice to get at least some clarity in terms of what direction they could potentially go. And again, obviously he's not going to get into details, but it would be nice if he at least painted some kind of a picture for us so we can at least get a better sense of what their thinking is.
Yeah, I don't even think we're gonna get that.
No, I don't think we will either. It's
uh,
wishful thinking on my part.
no, honestly, for us, we haven't sat in on a press conference of his yet. He's only talked, I believe, at the NFL owners meetings. I think maybe the combine too. So I'm looking forward just to kind of seeing how he interacts with the media. I think we talked a little bit about this last week. This press conference a year ago, I can't remember if it was Wolf and Mayo
It
or
was Wolf and Mayo.
and it
Yep.
was very awkward, if I remember right. Like there was a lot of tension in that room, and some of the answers from both guys, but specifically Wolf, were defensive. Like even before the draft started, this was a week before, and he was talking. What stands out to me was when they had signed, I believe it was Okorafor, and he was defensive about, I think we have a great offensive line, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, but they were very uptight and defensive at this press conference a year ago. So I think automatically tomorrow is going to be different just in terms of the messaging and all that. But I'm not expecting to learn a whole ton. Um, the Sanders thing is interesting. I hadn't heard that yet, obviously, but I've gone I've gone back and forth so many times now. Ultimately, I land on if Carter is there, you take him. If Hunter is there, you take him. I believe they're going to take Campbell. It's just a matter of do they stick and pick and take him, or do they try to trade down and still think they'll get him? So I think they end up with Campbell. Ultimately, that's just sort of where my head and my heart lay right now. But I do think if Hunter or Carter are there, you need to run up that card and pick them. But in terms of tomorrow, I'm just not expecting a whole ton of clarity. I'm really not.
Yeah, neither am I. And as far as last year's is concerned, I don't remember it being tens. I think last year was all about collaboration. And I think that
Yeah.
they both spoke and they were in unison. They were pretty lockstep. And you got to remember, last year I think was a little easier too because everybody knew they had a top 3 pick. They needed a quarterback. You'd have to be a fool not to think that's where they were going to go. So I don't remember it being tense. I do remember it being very much a conversation with us where they wanted to portray that they were on the same page.
Yeah.
So I think they went a little overboard in that regard. I agree with you. I don't think we're going to get much out of Vrabel tomorrow, and nor should we, right? It's that time of the year where at the end of the day, you got to be careful what you say now because you don't want to put out the wrong signal. So I don't think we're going to get much out of him. And Vrabel's been a head coach before. This isn't his first rodeo. He's not going to go out there and say something stupid like, you know, we got cash to spend or whatever else. I don't envision him saying anything that's going to compromise their approach and who they see as possible fits. I do agree with you. I think that there's one of 3 ways this is going to go, obviously. One, they're going to stick and pick and either take the best player available, who at that point, if it's either Hunter or Carter, would be one of them, or Will Campbell. I, again, have been told recently that they like Will Campbell in that building. I know Patriot fans and members of the media alike might be hung up on the wingspan and the arm length. They're not hung up on it. Internally, they like him. They like the player. They like the person. I think they would be very comfortable taking him at 4. I really do. Of course, the other scenario is they trade down. And I think that a lot of that will depend on ultimately what happens at pick 3 with the New York Giants. Again, I said this at the top of the show that they are working Shedeur Sanders out on Thursday. NFL Network's Tom Pelissero reported that tonight. So that does put this Patriots pick in a little bit of flux in that you may lose that trade down option if Sanders ends up going to the Giants at 3. But nonetheless, if he ends up going to the Giants at 3, now you're probably going to be in a pretty good position to take a very good player, and you're going to have your pick from 3 of the top 10 players that are going to be sitting there at that point, which could either be Hunter, Carter, Campbell, one combination of Hunter, Carter, and Campbell, or it could be, you know, Campbell and, you know, Shedeur Sanders is sitting there and a team wants to trade. Again, we'll see. We've done enough talking and speculating about this in recent weeks, and thankfully it is winding down. I did put up a piece today on anyfootballjournal.com, 20 prospects that the Patriots could potentially draft in the first round. That does take into account possible trade down scenarios and trade back into the first round scenarios as well. So if you subscribe to anyfootballjournal.com, go check that piece out. They're all names you've heard, but I paint a picture for you of how they could fit into the Patriots draft puzzle in the first round. We got plenty of good stuff coming up for you this week as well as next week regarding the NFL draft. Bill Vaughn checks in, friend of the show. Thanks for checking in, Bill. Viewership should be up today. He's talking about the show tonight. With Sox fans joining in, down 14-1 in the third. Yeah, this team is frustrating as hell. You lose 2 out of 3 to one of the worst baseball teams in history over the weekend. I don't know what to make of this team, but thanks for checking in, Bill. Appreciate you anyway. Ken Matthias checks in. If the Patriots draft Campbell, will they be regretting the pick, or should they choose the best available talent depending on what happens from 1 to 3? I'm going to go on record as saying it. Thanks for checking in, Ken. We appreciate you following along here. I'm going to go on record as saying I don't think you're going to regret a Will Campbell pick if you're the Patriots. I really don't. I think that they're going to get a good player out of it. Now, does he become an all-time great? Does he become a future Hall of Famer? Is he a perennial Pro Bowler and All-Pro? I'm not going to go that far. No one knows that. But I will say, I think if you take Will Campbell at 4, the reason I'm comfortable with that pick, and I think ultimately it would be a good pick for the Patriots, is if he doesn't work out at left tackle, Kevin, you kick him over 2 feet and he plays left guard. And I truly believe that he can play either one of those positions at a high enough level where he can garner all pro or Pro Bowl consideration. So I don't have a problem at all with taking Will Campbell there. It's by far your biggest need. Left tackle is a gaping hole. They need a long-term answer there. You're not going to get me to complain about taking Will Campbell at 4. If that's the pick, I'm okay with it. I'm actually pretty happy with it if that's the pick. And again, I'm going to say this. Unless Carter or Hunter are there and there's some internal conversation that night, I think Campbell is going to be the pick.
So at first reading that, my immediate response is they better not regret their 4th pick. You can't afford to blow this pick. This is
There's no guarantees.
No, of course.
No guarantees.
Of course.
And I said the same thing to Lions yesterday.
Yep.
We could sit here and talk about scenarios, and we could talk about how we're going to feel if the pick doesn't pan out. Nobody gives a shit how we feel. At the end of the day, there's no guarantee that the pick is going to pan out. I'm sorry.
No.
There just isn't. You can take Travis Hunter and Carter there. They may not pan out either.
No, of course. But ultimately, you're right. Nobody knows. You can't mess this pick up, though. And I don't think they're going to.
Again, there's no guarantee that you won't.
No, I know. But I feel like
the percentages are in your favor that it'll be a better player, obviously, than when they took Cole Strange in 2022. But again, Kevin, you know this is no guarantee that the player is going to pan out.
No, and you've talked me into beauty's in the eye of the beholder for years now. So look, if they feel one way and another team feels another way, who knows? We're not going to know for another year or two at least until these guys start playing. But look, I talked about this last week. I love the fact that people are doubting Campbell because I think he's going to play with that chip on his shoulder his entire career now. And I love the idea of a big guy like that playing with that edge on a team that desperately needs an edge on that line. So I've talked myself into Campbell as a guy now. Part of me still would be very intrigued by Warren. I love the idea of giving Drake a weapon like that. It's just hard for me to draft a tight end at 4. It really is when they need a tackle so badly. So
yeah, I think he's the wild card.
Yeah.
I said that in the piece I wrote this morning. I do think Tyler Warren is the wild card. He's the one player that I think could turn this thing upside down in terms of people going, whoa, they took him. I would not doubt it at 4. I wouldn't. Because I agree with you. He's a tight end. And I think most years you can make the argument that might be too high for a tight end.
Yeah.
And again, seeing how Kyle Pitts' career has played out, obviously you got to be careful of taking tight ends that high. Mm-hmm. But I'm with you. He's the wild card to me. I wouldn't discount him being in play at that pick.
I'm almost hoping for it just so we get that oh shit moment, that night. Because
let's just swear tonight. Who cares about the family show stuff? I'm with you on it.
That's fine. I do think ultimately, and again, remember how much Vrabel talked about tight ends and how much he loves them. Yeah. I'm trying to think when it was. I think it was the owners' meetings. If not, it was at the combine. But I wouldn't put it past them to do that. But ultimately, I just think you need a tackle so damn badly. Just go take Campbell. Like, I don't care what the arm length is and that stuff. Just plug that hole and then figure everything else out. Because we saw what happened last year when they didn't fix that. So I'm leaning towards Campbell at this point, but Warren would be a lot of fun. Look, he's not Brock Bowers by any means, but I do think he could have a severe impact.
Oh, I think he could be more impactful than Brock Bowers. Yes. I think Brock Bowers is a more complete receiver than Tyler Warren, but I think Tyler Warren can do more things. Tyler Warren is a former quarterback, man. He can play in direct snap packages. You can use him. He can lead block, kick out, wham block, fold block. He's not a vertical threat per se, but he is a guy at 6'6", 250 that you could do a lot of different things from the line of scrimmage to about 25 yards out. You can do a lot of things with him. He is a unique player in this draft. He's not your atypical Rob Gronkowski-esque, Travis Kelce-esque, run a seam, run a spot, run a crosser, a corner, or an out type of guy. He can do those things. And maybe he might not do them at the level that those guys can do them, but he could do a lot more things than those guys within an offense in terms of how you can use him. I think he is the reason I'm so intrigued by the possibility of them drafting him at 4 is the offensive coordinator in me is looking at it and saying, I would love a chess piece like this. You could really do a lot of different things with a player like him. Go back and watch his film at Penn State. They did a terrific job with how they used him the last 2 years.
Well, I was just going to say, Josh McDaniels might be salivating at the idea of having him in that
Probably
offense
is.
with
Yeah.
Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper as well, plus the other whatever weapons you add this or next weekend. So that's the most intriguing story to me, is if they go with him, but I'm leaning Campbell overall.
Look, I've said it forever. 12, 13 personnel, those personnel groupings are a bitch to defend. They are tough on defenses because you can do a lot. If you have 3 tight ends that are all receiving threats and they also offer alignment versatility, that's really hard on a defense, because now as a defensive coordinator, you have to play the matchup game, and you have to play the matchup game with tight ends. And if you have 3 guys that you can move around in formations, displace them, play them in line, play them as wings, split them out, play them in the slot. If you can do these different things with tight ends, 12 personnel is the hardest personnel grouping to defend in football. Ask any coordinator. They'll tell you that. It's tough because of what you can do with those guys, especially if both of them are receiving threats. Bill checks back in. If somebody trades up to grab Sanders, looking at a few teams, how far down could Pats drop and feel reasonably comfortable to get Campbell anyway? Bill, again, thanks for checking in, man. We really appreciate you and you watching the show. They can't fall out of the top 10, in my opinion. He's still going to go in the top 10. Even if there is a slide there, I still don't see him falling out of the top 10. I still think he's a top 10 talent. I mean, I think you could probably drop down to 9 if you made a trade with the New Orleans. But I think outside the top 10, if he's a player you like, I don't think you're going to get him. I think he's going to be gone. Ken checks back in. Let's see. He says, within the first 3 or 4 rounds, besides offensive tackle needing to be addressed, what other positions are you guys looking at that are the team's needs? Wide receiver, running back, more defensive help? Yeah.
All of the above.
Look, I mean, they've addressed a lot of their needs in free agency, but I do think this draft also has to be about looking to the future and adding future pieces that can help your football team down the road. I still think they need another interior defensive lineman. This draft is loaded up front, especially on defense. Interior defensive line, edge, you have a lot of talent. I would not have a problem if they, let's say, took Will Campbell at 4 and then somehow figured out a way to trade back into the first round and took a pass rusher, a Donovan Ezeraku, a Mike Green, a player like that, possibly a James Pierce out of Tennessee. I would not have a problem with that. In my opinion, given where the game is today, you can never have enough pass rushers. I've said it 1,000 times this offseason. Go back and watch this year's Super Bowl. Philadelphia dominated the line of scrimmage because they could get after Mahomes, and they didn't have to sacrifice bodies in the blitz game. They did it with a base pass rush. If you can get consistent pressure with a base pass rush and sit back and play coverage, well, then you can do what Vic Fangio did in that Super Bowl game, which is he rushed 4, played coverage, and sipped on his Diet Coke. That's what he did for 4 quarters, and he got his first ring out of it. So I would have no problem with them taking advantage of a talent-laden edge group and going out and getting another pass rusher. I think wide receiver is another position that you still need to look. Yes, you added Matt Collins, you add Stephon Diggs. It's a pretty good receiver class. Most years, given where the game is now, these receiver classes are going to be pretty good. But I think if you have an opportunity to add a young receiver day 2, perhaps in the 3rd round, this is a pretty deep group, especially if you can find a big X receiver type that can play on the backside of formation, specifically trips, that can be a matchup piece in the red zone. There's a bunch of those guys in this draft class. That could be a target area. I would not be opposed to another tight end. I would not be opposed to another corner, perhaps. And I would not be opposed to bringing in a running back. They need a 3rd running back. You got Stevenson. You got Gibson. This is a really deep running back class. I think you can get a really good player either in round 3 or early day 3.
Running back for me, it's almost a must. I think they go quarterback at some point. You almost have to now. You only have 2 on the roster currently constituted. So I think you need quarterback. I think you need running back. You mentioned
I don't think they go quarterback early, though.
Not really. No, just in general, I'm saying. sometime over the weekend, I think you're going to see them take a quarterback. No, I didn't mean early. But what do you think about safety? I think they need one because I'm not sure how much Duggar has really in the tank. And I know he's fairly young, but he's had some injury problems now. I don't think they're very deep at safety. I really don't. So I'd say safety as well. It's sort of
A lot of it depends on how they see Jabril Peppers, I think.
That's honestly,
I mean, right now you're looking at Duggar, Peppers, Hawkins, Pettis.
That's true.
I mean, you've got depth there. You've got Mapu. You've got depth there.
That's true.
I would be surprised if they took a safety. Certainly, they're going to bring in a couple of undrafted free agents potentially. Maybe they take a flyer on a guy in round 6 or 7, but I don't see it as a priority need. I think corner would be more of a need if you're talking about the secondary for them than safety.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Honestly, I forgot about Peppers. The way his season went last year, he was sort of out of sight, out of mind. I forgot he came back those last few weeks, but no, that's on me. So ultimately, I go quarterback, running back, tight end, receiver, pass rusher, and 2 or 3 offensive linemen. Like they do.
Yeah, and I wouldn't downplay them drafting a guard just because they have a plethora of bodies there, but just because they have a lot of bodies on the roster at that position right now, both of those positions, I would not be surprised if they brought in another guard to compete with those guys. Remember, Vrabel is going to want to build from the inside out. He did it in Tennessee. He's going to want to do it here. It's kind of that's where he is like Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick believed in building from the inside out as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if they took a guard either.
No, I wouldn't either. And even center. Look, I know you just signed Garrett Bradbury, but between him and Moses, they got some miles on him already. So you just don't know how long they're going to hold up. I know Bradbury isn't very old, I don't think. I'm going to say 26-ish, 25. But look, up there, you never know. One injury, and now you're back where you were last year without David Andrews. So really any O-line help, aside from what they do early on, I'm fine with.
And again, I would not be surprised after 4 picks if 2 of those picks are offensive line picks. If they take a tackle either at 4 or with their first round pick, and then they take another offensive lineman. I said this a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to stand by it. I think they're in a position where I would probably take 2 tackles with my first 2 picks and then just kind of go from there. I would. I would take a Will Campbell at 4, and maybe you come back at 38. If Ozzie Trapillo is sitting there at 38, you take him, which I've talked to a couple of people recently about him as well, and they told me that internally they like him.
They love him.
So at the end of the day, it's not the worst thing in the world because you can end up getting bookend starters out of that. Yeah, you signed Morgan Moses. Yeah, you re-signed Trey Jacobs. But if you can add a young right tackle to pair up with a young left tackle, and let's not forget, right? Let's say you make the decision to kick Will Campbell inside if you take him, and you take a Trapillo at 38. I think Trapillo can play left tackle in the NFL. I really do. That could end up being your left side. So you addressed a lot of your needs this offseason in free agency. Don't be afraid to splurge where it counts. Splurge up front. Ken checks back in. Quick idea for the show. Now we've gotten to the portion of the show where we're getting ideas. Quick idea for the show. Would you guys consider every once in a while to have a fan of the show come on, I'm assuming he's saying, and contribute? Just a thought. I understand if that's not possible. Don't you come on with us every week, Ken? Don't you check in every week anyway? You're already on the show. You check in with us every week. And by the way, we appreciate that you do that. Thank you for watching and following along. But you already do that, man. We do that anyway. So thanks for checking in, Ken. Really do appreciate it. Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what direction they go in with those first 2 picks. Because again, like I said, I would not be opposed to them taking 2 linemen.
So just one more question before we move on. You've done this, 25 years now, covering
I'm old.
the draft? I've never been a huge draft guy, but this is one of the more fascinating ones in terms of a Patriots perspective that I can ever remember. Yes or no?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's
huge.
a lot of uncertainty. Like I said earlier, last year, you knew they needed a quarterback. You knew they were going to take one of those 3 guys. I never believed last year that Joe Alt was in play or that they were going to go in another direction. I felt all along they were going to take one of those 3 quarterbacks. They couldn't afford to pass up on him because I knew that this year's quarterback group wasn't good enough. And I knew that last year's quarterback group was going to be the best quarterback group probably in the next 2 years anyway, until Arch Manning comes out from a potential standpoint. So I don't think there was a lot of intrigue last year. It was more about what they were going to do in the rest of the draft. I think this year, I agree with you. I think there's a ton of intrigue with this pick and what they're going to do. Do they stick and pick? Do they take best player available? Do they address a need? Do they trade down? Lots of question marks. And like we said earlier, Vrabel's probably not going to answer many questions on what direction they're going to go in tomorrow. So I wouldn't hold my breath on that. You are watching the New England Football Show presented by Mortgage Right. I'm your host, John Sarianides. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Kevin Stone. Just want to remind you that if you're in the market to sell your current home and purchase your next home, purchase your first home or refinance, give our good friend Herb Devine a call, 781-254-2846. You can also shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. He and his team are available anytime, including nights and weekends. All right, Stone, we're going to shift gears here now and talk a little bit of college football. Of course, spring practices in the area are starting to wrap up. We had 4 programs wrap up spring practices this past weekend. Boston College wrapped up practice on Saturday. You and I were there for that. Merrimack wrapped up practice on Friday night. You were there for that. Holy Cross wrapped up practice on Saturday. You were there for that. And Sacred Heart wrapped up spring practice on Saturday as well. So want to touch on those real quick, but let's start with Boston College. I know we broke it all down. We did a little post practice show, and then I wrote my 5 observations. I don't want to necessarily talk about the spring, but I kind of want to look ahead. Just some thoughts moving forward. Obviously, transfer portal opens up on April 18th, so it's going to open up on Friday. Should be interesting to see what happens here with Boston College. We both talked about this on the show we did after practice on Saturday, that we don't think you're going to really see any movement with Boston College. I think what you have now for the roster is probably going to be about 90% of their roster. If anything, I think they could bring in a couple of guys, but I don't really see any defections. I just don't think it makes sense because I think there's a lot of depth and competition on the roster. But looking ahead here, as we move on from spring practice, just some early fall camp thoughts and where do you think the program goes the rest of this offseason?
So we talked about this Saturday. On paper, they should be very good. The schedule is another thing. Their schedule is not easy by any means. We have plenty of time to talk about it and go over it. And the hard games are at home. But they're deep. They're deep in a lot of places you need depth at. The only place that they're thin, in my opinion, is linebacker. That's going to be a problem. But they were also very cautious with guys. Bam Crouch sat out all of spring ball. Owen McGowan sat out all of spring ball. In the secondary, Amari Jackson sat out all of spring ball. So you still have some key pieces that you haven't even seen in that defensive unit yet in year 2 of Tim Lewis. So linebacker is a question. I do think you'll see some movement in the portal from them with that position, but secondary,
I think they almost have to, right?
100%.
Yeah.
They're
not very deep there.
No, look, you had a transfer running back, Vaughn Pemberton, out of Ball State, getting legitimate run and making plays. You saw him have a couple PBUs on Saturday. He did that regularly throughout camp. That's a great story, but you really don't want to be relying on a running back as one of your starting linebackers when Fordham comes to town to open the year. Secondary, I think, is elite. And again, we didn't even see Amari Jackson, but how many kids made plays the other day? Well, you were there just to see it for the first time. Omar Thornton, Isaiah Ferris, he's probably been their best coverage guy all camp. So I think that unit, Max Tucker was quiet, but he's still one of their better, top secondary guys. So in the back, you got KP Price. So I think that unit is outstanding. Defensive line, I think will be fine with George Rooks, Stoudemire, a couple others.
Hugh Hutchins, who I thought had a really good day on Saturday. And
he's going to be a force off the edge.
He had a really good spring. I think he's going to really pop. We've been seeing glimpses of it with him, but now that he's the man, the leading pass rusher returning, I think he's going to capitalize on those snaps and make the most out of them.
Well, it's funny. Towards maybe the middle of the year, he was starting over Netawak Pawa last year, and getting a lot more playing time. So he might be able to take that next step. In terms of offense, look, I think the quarterbacks are neck and neck. I really do. And I was a big Grayson James guy last year. I still am this year. I think he's the right leader for that team, especially the way he handled himself and everything that went on last year. But look, Bill O'Brien recruited Dylan Lonergan. There's a connection there, and you can't ignore that in today's day and age. Not only that, but the kid played pretty damn well throughout camp. I was impressed with how quickly he picked up the offense. Maybe I shouldn't be since he was at Bama, and they operate differently, and I'm sure it was a little bit easier coming here. But I think that position is neck and neck. I think the receivers are extremely deep. You have a top three of Lewis Bond, Reed Harris, and Jaden Skeet. If those three are healthy, that's one of the best trios in the ACC. I'd put them against anybody. And then the guy I was talking about, you finally got to see in person, is VJ Wilkins, the transfer out of Campbell. This kid's electric, and you can move him anywhere. So they have him at their disposal, and I think the running back room is deep too. You can go 4 or 5 deep with starters, and that's not even including Mekhi Dodd and Bo McCormick, who are coming in as well. So look, on paper, and then we won't get into special teams because I still have no clue in terms of how they fix that. But I do think the kicking game will be better. Overall, on paper, they should be a very good team, even with the thin depthness. That's not even a word. At
It's
linebacker,
not.
no way it is. But
let's not make up words.
no, it's
Depthness.
Sure. No, they're deep. They should be good. Important games are at home. There's no excuse. They're at the very least 8 wins. Again, it should
Here we
be.
go. Let's not do this because we've got
I'm not saying
months before fall camp.
No. Hear me out. I'm not saying they should. I'm saying the bar for them should be 8 wins. Their expectation should be 8.
So then you're saying they should.
Well, maybe. I'm not saying they will. Put it that way. But if you're them, your bar can't be.
I would wait until you got bullish. I know you tend to be bullish with that.
I'm not yet.
But I would wait. We've got a long way to go before we start forecasting wins for our local college teams.
No, but honestly, with where this team is, and especially now that O'Brien has a lot of his guys in there, the bar needs to be higher. And that's not to say it hasn't been. Yes.
Yeah, he would tell you that. Absolutely.
100%. So I think they're going to be good, but again, it's only April and there's a long way to go, as you pointed out.
And of course, on Friday night, you were at Merrimack. What did you see out of Coach Mike Giannetti's team? Got a good group of players coming back, a lot of local talent that's going to be expected to step up for the Warriors. Warriors played arguably the best schedule in New England last year. They're going to have another tough schedule this year. What did you think of the Warriors when you saw them in person the other night?
So you can speak to this as well as I can. Anytime you're in year 2, things are going to flow differently. They're going to be easier this time around. So spring ball for them, it was more productive. And Giannetti would say, look, year 1 was year 1 and the results weren't there, but it's about building that culture and getting kids to understand how you want to do things. So automatically they're already a little bit ahead of where they were. But 2 local guys in particular, Aiden Pereira and Matthias Latham, they're the leaders of that team on the offense. Matthias ran hard the other night. It's for
the former Central Catholic product.
Yeah, both of them. Yeah, for a game in April, pads were popping, guys were chirping. It was good to see. There's a lot of team speed. Receivers are unproven, but there's depth there as well. I was impressed with the pass rush. There was a lot of pressure up front, whether it was 1s, 2s, or 3s. So, look, a down year last year, but I'd expect them to bounce back. The only problem I have is they're still an independent. Going into year 2 as an independent, it's just hard. It's just a hard life as a Division I FCS school, as an independent one. So if you can avoid, the pitfalls that come with that, I think they're a 500 team or so. And again, it's only April, so they could easily, kind of exceed that once camp comes around. But there's talent, there's depth, there's speed, and the staff is cohesive. So I'd expect a bounce back here from them.
Yeah, I think a lot of their success is going to hinge on whether or not they can replace Jermaine Corbett, who had a big year for them at running back. You mentioned Latham. He's going to be counted on among a couple of other backs to step up and fill those shoes. Obviously, Aiden Pereira will now settle in as your starting quarterback. And one thing we know about Aiden, again, he and Latham both played for Chuck Adamopoulos at Central Catholic. One thing we know about Aiden Pereira is that he's a gamer. When the lights come on, he plays his best football. And I think he'll settle things down for them at the quarterback position. They got to replace Corbett. You got to replace Donovan Wadley. Some playmakers there that need to be replaced. The offensive line has some holes that need to be addressed as well. You got to replace Amir Johnson. You got to replace Cole Berdow. I mean, they're going to need guys to step up front on offense. Same thing goes on defense. And one thing about Merrimack, and we saw this when Dan Kern was there, and we see it now with Coach Giannetti, they recruit really good talent and they recruit speed. They place a premium on speed. This is why NFL scouts are routinely in the building at Merrimack, because they know that they recruit speed. They recruit NFL caliber type talent. And so you saw that speed firsthand on Friday night. And you're right. Life is hard as an independent. And I think that that's part of the problem for them. And it's the same problem facing Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart, of course, wrapped up spring ball on Saturday. Same issue with them. And while the benefits to being an independent is you can make up your own schedule and you can kind of cater it to what you want it to be, and you can highlight your program more. For example, Sacred Heart's going to go out to play Montana State this year. I think at the end of the day, it's hard. And talking to people around both programs, the prevailing thought is they need to be in a conference, and the goal is to be in a conference within the next couple of years. I know both schools are working on that. But Sacred Heart also wrapping up spring ball on Saturday. Mark Knopfler's squad had a productive spring. They finished strong last year, beating Merrimack in the inaugural Yankee Conference Championship game. So they're going to get a chance to host that game this year down at Sacred Heart. But good spring for Mark Knopfler's squad. Some big names that they need to replace, especially on defense. But the coaching staff down there is really happy with the way the spring went. They're happy with the guys that they have coming back. So Sacred Heart showed some improvement last year, much better than the previous 2 years. They're going to look to continue that. And again, they had a really strong spring that's going to put them in position to have a good fall camp. They're another program that will probably dip into the portal and add a couple of pieces to augment their roster. And of course, on Saturday, Kevin, you were at Holy Cross to watch Dan Curran's Crusaders wrap up their spring. It feels like they started spring ball 2 weeks ago. You blink and it was over. Just some thoughts on the Crusaders and what you saw from them.
I feel like I say the same thing every year, but they look and sound the same. Big up front on both sides, running the crap out of the ball. Jaden Clairvaux is
going to have a monster year, I think.
Monster year. He's phenomenal. There's a couple guys behind him, like Sam Slade especially, that can carry the rock. One receiver in particular, Elijah Kaysen, had a monster day. This kid can go up and get it. He had some highlight reel plays. And I think the quarterback is going to be the transfer, Cal Swanson. He was getting first-team reps. It looked good. I think they're going to be right there in the mix again for a Patriot League title for, trying to think, year 7 in a row. The staff, again, some changes there, but nothing feels all that different. It's just business as usual out there in Worcester. It's amazing how, look, Dan Curran and Bob Chesney are obviously different coaches, but they're really not. And again, you know this, just having dealt with them, they run the same type of program, just, minor tweaks here and there. But the depth and the speed and the talent is all there. The only thing I'm a little bit worried about is the youth. They're a much younger team than they have been, but you also have senior leaders up front where you sort of need them the most, and in the back in the secondary as well. So highly encouraged by Holy Cross. And again, I'd expect them to be right there in the mix for another Patriot League title again.
Yeah, they should be. And I think in a lot of ways, the youth might serve them well because it's going to be year 2 of Dan Curran's regime. You want to start to pull away and carve your own identity. Yeah, there are a lot of similarities in the program between Chesney and Curran and the way they do things and the way they ran the program. But if you're Dan Curran, you want this to be your thing. you want to start to carve your own niche and your own identity. And I think that young players that you recruited in particular or brought in through the portal, I think those guys stepping up and playing prominent roles is going to be good for this Holy Cross program. They need that because last year I still think they were reliant on a lot of the guys that were brought in by Coach Chesney and his staff. And hey, they were really good football players. So there was nothing wrong with being reliant on those guys. But I do think in 2025, Holy Cross is going to be more reliant on guys that Dan Kern and his staff has brought in over the course of the past year. So I definitely think that's going to help. You're still going to have a lot of guys left over in the program that were brought in by Coach Chesney and that staff that are going to be the faces of your program and your biggest contributors. But certainly some of the guys that Coach Kern brought in, it's going to be good to see some of those guys step up and do their part as well. Of course, you'll have a bunch of spring practices wrapping up this week as well. UMass wraps up their spring on Saturday with their annual spring game. Our Ryan Barry is going to be there for that. URI wraps up the spring on Saturday as well with their annual spring game. We'll have coverage of that. I'll be going down to Brown this week to visit the Bears for a spring visit. Dartmouth kicked off spring ball this week. Maine has gone into week 3. UNH is in week 3 as well of spring ball, or entering week 3. So hard to believe, man. We're going to get a bunch more done here, but it feels like the spring takes forever because it's such a busy time of the year for us and visiting these various college programs. But they're wrapping up, man, and they're wrapping up fast.
Yeah, pretty soon we'll be at regular training camp in like 2 months. Crazy.
Don't say that.
I know. Believe me, I know.
As much as we love football, we also could use a break. And we don't get one, by the way, because after spring ball is over, after the NFL draft is over, it's showcase season in May. Then we get into camp season in June. So really, we get some time off around the 4th of July, end of June, after minicamp, after Patriots minicamp. That 3-week window between the end of June and early July, and that's it. We get about a month, and then we start talking about Patriots training camp. So it certainly does go by fast. But like I said, again, we'll have continuing coverage of all the spring practices out there, and we're going to try to get to as many of them as we can. Be patient with us. Obviously, our ability to get to spring practice depends on our ability to get there, but also our freelancers' schedule and their availability, and we use them when they're available. So we're going to try to get to as many spring games or final practices as we can here. There's another big event this past weekend, yesterday, in fact, at St. Sebastian's High School, the Shot for Life fundraiser, which is a tremendous fundraiser. Mike Slanina does a great job with that, he and his organization. They raised over $70,000 yesterday. Some of the top players in Massachusetts participated in the 7-on-7 tournament. Quarterback Peter Bork from Tabor. You had running back Mackay Dodd, formerly of Catholic Memorial. He's going to be going to Boston College, of course. Vince Noonian from BBNN. There was a slew of talented players who really impressed and put on a good show, and they did it for a good cause, raising a bunch of money.
Yeah, and it's funny. I didn't know this until, we talked to people for the story that we put up. There's a legitimate recruiting process to this entire thing. These kids are scouted. They then go through an interview, and then they have to fundraise a certain amount of money to take part in this. So this is no, one of high schools, I don't know if you ever had to do this, but this community service, in order to graduate or something like that. These kids aren't forced to do this. It's a legitimate thing that they want to be a part of. And ultimately, it's, I don't want to call it a full-time job, but they're at this for a while before they even get to, yesterday's event. So credit to everyone that participates. And the Shot for Life thing, I remember when it first became a thing, I was at the Metro West Daily News, and it was just sort of this cute little, story, a nice cancer fundraiser. You always hear about different stuff going on and stuff like that. And what it's turned into is simply amazing. So credit to everyone that takes part in all of the sports, but especially the football one as well.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic fundraiser. And I love that it's spread out to football now and other sports as well, because it does allow as many local athletes as possible to have the opportunity to compete and raise money. And like you said, they're doing it all for a good cause. So It's great to see. And of course, there's going to be an event on April 27th in Connecticut, Hartford, Connecticut. We hope to be able to cover that Shot for Life event as well. So stay tuned for that. Massachusetts Pirates picked up their first win of the season on Saturday. Of course, they've opened with 3 straight home games. A big win for the Pirates. They needed it after starting the season 0-2. They beat Fisher's Freight, who was coming into the game undefeated. They're undefeated no more. Pirates with a scintillating 50-47 win. And of course, Pirates, we knew going into this season that they were going to be young. They had to replace Alejandro Benefield, who retired. They still have a lot of veterans back like Thomas Owens, but they lost Jimmy Robinson, standout running back in free agency. A lot of new faces on offense, new coaching staff again. Kenji Barr at quarterback. He had struggled through 2 weeks, but they did a pretty good job here in picking up a big win against an undefeated Fisher's Freight team. Of course, Fisher's Freight is an expansion team out of Indianapolis. They started the season 2-0, so nice win for the Pirates. Pirates, because of the way the schedule lines up in the IFL, they're going to be playing several teams more than twice. So they're going to be playing the Jacksonville Sharks, for example, 3 times. So nonetheless, big win for the Pirates. Congratulations to them on picking up their first win of the season. Of course, the Mass Pirates play all of their home games at the Songus Arena in Lowell. So make sure that you go to masspirates.com for more information there, and we try to cover the Pirates as best we can. We'll do game stories, we'll do previews, and certainly if anything else comes up and we can feature it, we will. We enjoy arena football and covering it, and the Pirates are a good take. If you haven't had an opportunity to get to a Pirates game, I strongly encourage it. They do a good job there, and it's a really good take. And hey, it's spring football, and arena football is awesome. It's fun. I've always said to people, Kevin, if you've never seen arena football in person, it's one of those things you should make it a point to go to because it's crazy, man. It's crazy. The contact, the physicality. It's football, but it's a lot different. The big plays, the physicality. It's a lot of fun.
If we ever get a chance to breathe, we should go live there one night. I've never been to a game, honestly. So
yeah, it's a good take.
Yeah.
It's a good take with them, and I remember back. Geez, now we're talking close to 15 years ago. I also did a game down in Orlando, an Orlando Predators game. So arena football is a great take. I've always said that. It's great to see the Pirates win their first game of 2025. They still have several home games left on the slate. So, again, make sure you go to masspirates.com for more information on games and how you could purchase tickets. All right, Stone, final thoughts here before we wrap it up. A little bit of a shorter show this week. We got plenty of content coming up, though, with spring ball and the draft, but some final thoughts here.
I got nothing for a change, but just as always, stick with us. And you, of all people, know the draft better than anyone around here. So I cannot encourage people enough to read your stuff, and we will be all over it these next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and a final thought for me, I do want to congratulate Jim O'Leary, who was named the new head football coach at Noble and Greenough. Of course, Coach O'Leary stepped away from Governor's Academy prior to last season. He's back coaching, and I think it's great for the ISL and for local high school football that Coach O'Leary is back coaching. He's done a terrific job both from an admissions and coaching standpoint. So it's great to see him back. And he inherits a really good Nobles team. They went 7-2 last year, won the John McKay Bowl over Kingswood, Oxford. So they've got some good talent back. So Coach O'Leary is inheriting a pretty good program over at Nobles and Greenough. That'll do it for this week's episode of the New England Football Show. For Kevin Stone, I'm John Sarianides. We will be back with you next week on the eve of the NFL Draft. Until then, happy Easter, stay safe, and we'll talk